people are watching this after Thanksgiving, welcome back. It's time to catch you guys up on the main slate for Week 12. The good news is Rich Rebar still with us. You know him, his fantastic work at sharpfootballanalysis.com and the worksheet. Reebs, this is a chaotic week overall, one where I think that a lot of people just aren't as prepared for the main slate as usual. They're out of their routines, all of that stuff. Is that something that you kind of struggle with in this week overall as well?
No, just because like you hit on the lead and like just the job in general. I'm working with all these games so early, and so where I think a lot of analysts or people, the content producers, they're focusing on the Thanksgiving slate and that content coming out first, and then they work their way to Sunday. Whereas like I've already done all the games, so right. I've got a little more of a pulse by having to write all these games up by Tuesday, and then I just adjust for injuries and like news throughout the week. So it kind of helps me that I've done that, especially in a week like this. And we're talking about these games because there are more games than Thursday, and honestly, there's one more game now that would have been on Thursday that's going to be on this slate. If you did like that Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, guess what? You can play it now on this slate.
So now I got to now I got to play Hollywood Brown on the main slate, is what you're telling me? God, I thought I'd get that out of the way on Thursday, which is brutal. All right, so per usual, we're going to go through the three most interesting games of the week from a fantasy perspective, just one that might set up for a ton of points. This first one, LA Chargers at Buffalo Bills. The Bills are a 5.5-point home favorite with a 53.5-point over-under per blitzbet.eu. This seems like the game, Reebs, that everyone's going to kind of start with after they're kind of catching up after Thanksgiving. Tell us why you like it so much for points.
I think the Chargers are the new Seahawks now. We've transitioned to where like they just don't play normal games. You look at the Chargers; they've allowed 28 or more points now in 7 straight games, and 4 of their past 5 games have come against the Jets, the Dolphins, the Broncos, and the Jaguars. So like they're shooting out with those teams. So like we always worry about when we have these high-powered offenses, like can this team answer back? Well, the Chargers are just playing like these really bonkers games against teams that really don't play these games against anybody else either. So I mean, there's a lot of points to be had here. And you look at the Charger side, like they've got a lot of guys that have grown in terms of salary, but there still are some ancillary pieces that I think that can serve us and offer ceiling as well. Obviously, Justin Herbert is where we start about just. He's literally off to one of the better starts in NFL history through 9 starts. I mean, through 9 starts, he is now has the most passing yardage and 3rd in touchdown passes. He's thrown multiple touchdown passes in 7 of his first career 9 starts. Only Kurt Warner has thrown for more. Just racking up points. 7 straight games or 20 or more points. He's thrown 20 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. We always talked about touchdown equity on the show. When we stack teams, well, who do we stack? What players do we get from these teams? It's really easy with the Chargers. Justin Herbert has accounted for 86% of their offensive touchdowns, either him throwing them in or running them in. That's the highest in the league. His counterpart in this game, Josh Allen, is at 84%. That's 3rd with Deshaun Watson in the middle. So when you play those guys, you know where the touchdowns are going to be scored. Justin Herbert is producing the most touchdowns of any quarterback on his team in the league. So we could play Herbert. Obviously, Keenan Allen's just been on like an absolute tear of just stacking targets. 19 targets last week. He now leads the league in targets per game. Obviously he's had double-digit targets in every full game he's played with Justin Herbert. He's also scoring touchdowns, which has kind of been like Keenan Allen's like bugaboo. He scored a touchdown in 4 straight games. It's only the 2nd time in his career he's done that. And from a matchup stance, like he plays 48% of his routes in the slot. And that's where we've kind of been attacking the Bills is on the interior all season. Tre'Davious White hasn't played a snap in the slot all season. Cooper Kupp, 9 for 107-1 against them. Jamison Crowder, 7, 115-1. Isaiah Ford, 7 for 77. Hunter Renfrow, 5 for 57. That's where we've been attacking Buffalo as players that operate in the interior. Keenan Allen's got all 6 of his touchdowns from the slot this season as well. So, even for a guy that splits 50-50, he's caught all 6 of his touchdowns in there. And then Mike Williams has started to come along for the ride here. Look at him. He's had double-digit PPR points in 4 of his past 6 games. Now he has had a game with 4 yards and 28 or 38 yards to kind of keep us honest in the Mike Williams way. Can never go all in with both feet on Mike Williams. But we've seen him, kind of have these splash moments. And Mike Williams is the type of guy that like would catch like a jumping touchdown on a Tre'Davious White or something. Well, none of his targets are ever normal. But he's the guy like you're not really ever worried about like in a cornerback matchup because the targets he gets are so high leverage. They're all downfield targets and they're all in the end zone. Mm-hmm. So you don't really care whoever he faces any week. And then Hunter Henry scored in the past 2 games too, but his yardage still isn't there. But he's come along too a little bit for the ride as well. And we talked about the other side on the Bills. the Bills have had to sit on this DeAndre Hopkins Hail Murray for 2 weeks now. Like, talk about having your bye and just having that taste in your mouth just linger. But Josh Allen, before the bye, got back to being the Josh Allen he was in the beginning of the season. Now, that was against the Seahawks and the Cardinals, but we just talked about the Chargers defense. They have been just giving up points to a bunch of players. They're 22nd in passing points allowed per game. What's crazy is their peripherals are still good. They're not giving up high yards per attempt. They're not, giving up, like I said, on a per pass basis. But all the guys they're giving just huge plays in the passing game. That's kind of where Josh Allen still could thrive too. 5.7 touchdown rate allowed by the Chargers. That's 27th in the NFL. We talked about, Allen's touchdown equity. Stephon Diggs is the only wide receiver in the NFL to have double-digit PPR points in every single game he's played this season. Ultra high floor. He also has 6 20-point plus games too, so he's got a high floor and a high ceiling. Cole Beasley might play, and I know you'll laugh about this because John Brown in the games. Look at John Brown's been limited to come out and look at Cole Beasley's stat lines. Like he's been excellent in those games. Yep. So just something to keep your pulse on as well too. I know no one ever wants to click Cole Beasley's button.
I can't remember what week it was, but I mean Josh Allen was the absolute chalk, easy double stack with Diggs and with John Brown. And John Brown gets hurt in like the first or second quarter, and then it's Cole Beasley season, man. So that could easily happen if John Brown's limited. I think that's a great call. I love the price for Stephon Diggs. If everyone's just going to go to Keenan Allen's $8K. So both of these guys, I think that will be soaking up a ton of the wide receiver ownership. I guess on the subject of ownership, that's one thing that I got wrong last week. I was on Herbert all week. I ended up having some shares, but nothing on any of my high dollar teams. Unfortunately, I guess it was the haircut, man. I got scared. I thought that people would be rostering him, and then he ended up coming in lower than the Lamar stacks anyways. But let's move on to the next game. Carolina at Minnesota. The Vikings are -4 point home favorites. 50 point over under in this game per blitzbet.eu. What do you think about this game overall? Looks like Teddy is trending towards playing, if that changes anything for you. But interesting that this Vikings offense overall has kind of been catching stride.
Yeah, Teddy back in Minnesota will ride the narrative. He's going to be definitely up for this game. But I mean, actually, what we want Teddy to play though, anyways. I mean, it was nice. Philip Walker of XFL is a good story, but he threw 2 terrible end zone interceptions that kind of stopped them from getting even more points in that game. We definitely want Teddy to come back. I like Minnesota for a tournament stance, anyways. And we talk about these matchup shows for a couple times, just because they're consistent leverage. No one likes to play them because if you look at their peripherals, they don't run a lot of plays. They play slow. And that's why in tournaments, we don't care. It's all right. Like it's when these guys are chalky. I never like to play Adam Thielen when he's chalk in cash. I never like to play Justin Jefferson when he's chalk cash because they might throw 15 passes. They might throw 20 passes. They've done this before to us. But now that Dalvin Cook has surged and is this 10 to 11K priced running back, and everyone's trying to jam him in, the passing game has become leverage every week. That's why I kind of got to them last week as well. It's like, well, everyone's just going to try to jam Dalvin Cook, and what do we have to do? We have to hope Dalvin Cook doesn't score. We're going to play the pass catchers, and they score 30 points and, get there with Thielen. Hopefully we do get Thielen. He was, placed on the COVID IR list, but, he already apparently had 1 negative test.
So what is that? You got a face positive or something like that? So they have to continue to test him throughout the week to see if he's going to play or not. It's such a weird situation.
Right. Yeah, it's unique. So you got to keep tabs on it. But Adam Thielen has 15 end zone targets, the most in the NFL. So when they do get down there, and if you don't get a Dalvin Cook touchdown, it's probably going to be Adam Thielen. 36% of his points this season have come from touchdowns, by far the highest in the league. It's even higher than Mike Evans, surprisingly, who's a pretty touchdown dependent himself, but leads the NFL with 11 touchdown catches. They're dialing up plays for him. Jefferson is a bit opposite. He kind of has to score from outside the end zone, and he kind of has to get these long touchdowns. It makes him always like a weird tournament play, but that's what drives him to be a tournament play. And if you look at Carolina, for as much zone as the Carolina plays, they play more zone coverage than any team in the NFL. They are actually 30th in the NFL in completion rate allowed on throws over 15 yards downfield. That's not the MO of what a zone defense should be, but they give up chunk plays in the passing game, and that's where Jefferson thrives. That's where he gets all his targets. 28.8% of his catches have gone for 20 or more yards, by far the highest rate in the league for guys that have 30 or more targets on the season. So that's your leverage. I mean, everyone wants to jam Dalvin Cook in. It's easy to get to that leverage. The other side is a little trickier. It doesn't look like we're going to have Christian McCaffrey again. Mike Davis got into the box last week, but if you look at just Mike Davis, though, now there's no receptions to glom onto anymore. because he's not catching the ball anymore. And, Curtis Samuel is elevated, and it has to be one of the guys that's been part of the reason why the Mike Davis isn't catching the football anymore is Curtis Samuel starting to get regular targets every week. But if we kind of had another shift in the Carolina offense, if you look at it now, DJ Moore has now matched Robbie Anderson in terms of weighted opportunity for the season. After this recent surge, he's had 18 targets the past 2 games. People are really down on DJ Moore from a season-long stance, I guess, because they thought they were buying something different what they got. But over his past 7 games, DJ Moore has 93 or more receiving yards in 5 of those past 7 games. He's just not getting a lot of receptions. But if he's going to be a guy that's going to get 11, 8 targets like he did the past 2 weeks, I mean, he's definitely a guy that you got to have to look to because he's getting those high leverage targets. Again,
he's like consistently the lowest owned of the group too. I guess you can make an argument for Curtis Samuel, and too, just to tie a bow on what you're saying about him versus Mike Davis, a negative 0.4 correlation between Mike Davis and Curtis Samuel. So he's definitely taking some of that pass gaming usage. I think that's very, very, very sharp.
Yeah, and then Curtis Samuel himself is interesting. The only problem with Curtis Samuel is if you look at his games where he doesn't score a touchdown, like you are boned. Like he just does not. Last week was like the first time we've seen him like really produce high yardage. He had one other 100-yard game, but his games without a touchdown, like he's not even cracking the top 50 scorers at his position. So I mean, you have to get a touchdown from Curtis Samuel, whereas like you necessarily don't with a guy like DJ Moore. But you obviously if he does score a touchdown, it's going to be big. And then you look at just the end zone targets too. DJ Moore has 7. Robbie Anderson only has 3. Robbie Anderson has 1 touchdown this season. It's kind of like Robert Woods from last year. That's how he's being used. And everyone will look at the amount of receptions and yards he has and say, well, there has to be regression. There has to be regression. There's actually no touchdown regression to be had if you're not getting end zone targets, you're not getting red zone targets. That's the same thing we saw with Robert Woods last year when he had just the 4 end zone targets all season. People saying, oh, he's getting all these targets, he's getting all these catches. Darren Waller was the same way last year, and you've seen Darren Waller this season. Darren Waller already has more end zone targets than he had all of last season. That's why he's scoring touchdowns. Same thing with Robert Woods. Robbie Anderson has 3 end zone targets on the season, and he hasn't had one in 4 games. So, I mean, it's hard to regress when you don't get a chance to score, when you have to score from 50 yards out, when you have to score these long touchdowns. So, I mean, Robbie Anderson has turned to a very, very floor-based play. And we've seen his volume also start to decrease in his yardage. I mean, he has had 77 yards or fewer in every game since week 5. Maybe that shifts, and that maybe there's that kind of is a signal that maybe he'll pop back to where he was at the beginning of the season. But we need some end zone targets there.
I'm with you. Reeves, we're failing horribly to get you out on time right now, but I do want to touch quickly on KC at Tampa Bay. The Chiefs are minus 3-point road favorites, 55.5 point over under. There could be some fireworks in this one. KC versus Tampa Bay, Mahomes versus Brady. Definitely some options overall from a fantasy perspective. So let's talk about this game quickly before you get out of here.
Yeah, and we've seen this. This has been the Bucs' MO. They've struggled on prime time. All 4 games they played on prime this season. But look at their losses, what they've come back and done. Their previous 3 losses, the Bucs have scored 31, 38, and 46 points. The Chiefs' D has kind of regressed themselves this year. I mean, if you look at their season-long stats, it's going to tell you not to play pass catchers or quarterbacks against them. But they've turned in 2 back-to-back duds where both Teddy and Derek Carr have paced them. 2 guys that really aren't that kind of their MO to kind of just punch back in the high 30-point games. But they've done that. So now you get a guy like Tom Brady, and we've got the Angry Tom narrative. But it's been tried and true this year. Look at the Bucs after losses. They've come back and really tore it up. The one concern I think you would have with Tampa Bay is that their offensive line is starting to get kind of battered. And that's just, Brady under pressure. 4.3 yards per attempt under pressure as opposed to 7.6 yards per attempt kept clean. That's your one worry. The Chiefs do blitz at a top 5 rate in the NFL as well. So if that, Bucs offensive line isn't fully healthy, you're worried about just the pressure getting home on Brady, because he just has not been a guy the past couple of years in the NFL that has been able to adjust to pressure. But yeah, I think that the Bucs can answer back. And just the Chiefs in general, we are now 11 weeks in the season, and we just have not had the Chiefs on the main slate very often this year. They just really they haven't been on there. So like the teams don't, I feel like their ownership is never where it should be. Every time I go into one of these games, one of these slates, and I click on to see like where Patrick Mahomes is, or Travis Kelce, or Tyreek Hill. And granted, those guys are expensive and you have to jam them in, but they're always under where I believe that where I thought they were going to be coming in. And it's just because I think they've been so out of sight on these main slates for so often that we don't gravitate to them weekly because we always go back to the plays we've played all season. It's like you kind of are you're mentally geared up. It's like, hey man, I've been playing Terry McLaurin for weeks. I'm going to get him in. He's underpriced again. I'm going to go back and play him. And you don't really just kind of just gloss over Tyreek Hill because you haven't really seen his name on the main slate very often.
Yeah, it's not that he hasn't been doing anything. It's because we haven't had the opportunity to play him. Like Kelsey is 7K on this slate, but I mean Tyreek's still balling out. It feels like each and every week. But you said it, like there was that week where they were playing the Jets. No one wanted to play Kansas City between all the blowout factor that could be coming. But that's the week that Leone shipped the Thunderdome with like a full Mahomes stack with some of the cheap pieces on the other side. So yeah, we talked about that game earlier, Herbert versus Allen. People are just going to gravitate towards that game first. And maybe this Kansas City Tampa Bay game, people are just like, oh, I can't play Mahomes against this Tampa Bay defense. No thanks. And I think that's the complete opposite way they should be thinking about. Vegas is all over this game, a 55.5 point over under. So I like this game quite a bit. Any other final thoughts? I guess we should probably touch on Antonio Brown, man. That his target share has been completely insane since he's joined the team.
I will say too, just that touching on Chiefs, and obviously we don't need support, but the way people have been punting at tight end this year, that I mean, don't ignore Kelsey. Like Kelsey would be the wide receiver 3 in points per game. He's posting as many points per game as Keenan Allen is in PPR.
Wow.
Like, so I mean, like, don't ignore him. Like, they should probably price him up even more, just because he's such an advantage. He has the point differential from Travis Kelce to Darren Waller is the difference from Darren Waller to the tight end 20.
Wow.
I mean, it's like Kelce is a huge leverage when he plays on slate. So don't ignore him. I know you just never want to play a tight end that expensive, but man, he is not performing like a tight end. He has been a wide receiver 1 this season. Antonio Brown, you kind of hit about, man. I mean, is you look at the opportunities that this guy's getting. Obviously, you don't bring in a guy like Antonio Brown if you don't plan to use him. Right. Target share 13%, all the way up to 21% to 27% on Monday night. Leads the team in air yards in the games that he's played. Listen, I know everyone's dropped this stat. Tom Brady has not completed a pass over 20 yards over the last 4 weeks. You know what's going to happen eventually? He's going to complete one. Yeah. And if it is, it's probably going to Antonio Brown. The other guy they're using downfield is Gronk. Those are the 2 guys that are getting the downfield targets. But Antonio Brown's getting a lot of air yards and a lot of vertical targets. He's going to hit on one of these. I think he's definitely the guy you would look to try to run it back and hit a big play. Godwin's more of the floor play guy. The thing that's hurting Godwin, and because you look at him, he's got, 5-6 catches every game but 1 this season. What hurts Godwin is he's lost 4 yards per catch. And his ADOT is way lower. He's just used near the line of scrimmage a lot more than he was last year. And that's what's hurt his counting stats because he's getting the receptions. His receptions per game are not far. They're like 0.2 off from last year. It's the ADOT and where he's catching the ball that has hurt Chris Godwin. This season, this transition to Brady. And Mike Evans he's just so touchdown dependent. But he has seen 11 and 9 targets the past 2 weeks. So it's getting there for Mike Evans, but he's hit 75 yards in just 3 games this season, and 2 were in games Godwin didn't play. I like Antonio Brown than most of those guys. I think Brady's interesting as well because no one's going to want to play Brady because everyone's dunking on Brady all week. Even his head coach is dunking on him. So no one's going to play him. But listen, look at the Bucs after losses. They have come back and they've punched back every week. So don't overlook them.
That's the catch up right now. If you're behind because of Thanksgiving, it's Angry Tom week. Welcome, week 12. So Rich Rebar, everyone, make sure you follow him on Twitter. He's at LordReebs. Obviously, the worksheet at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Definitely check that out. Anything else you want to plug, Reebs? The floor is yours.
Just happy holidays, everyone, and everyone stay safe. I don't know if everyone's traveling, but if you are, stay safe. At LordReebs, sharpfootballanalysis.com, pre-snap motion, Sharp Angles podcast, 3:15 every Wednesday. Joel Holka show, cutting these matchups up.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon. Appreciate you.